All right. Good evening and good morning, my friend. I think it's already 8:50. I just took a shower and turned off my phone. I want to just enjoy some reading time before bed. I'm going to continue reading this novel by Amy Tan. Amy Tan. All right. That's my dog. She's chucking lots of water. She spent almost the entire day out with me. Okay, let me see. I'll just continue from page 22. When Phil and I married, it was Mary and Dog who were our matron of honor and best man. Since they had introduced us, they were the first people we confided in when we found out I was pregnant with Tessa. And about 7 years ago, Mary was the one who pushed me into aerobics. When I complained I felt tired all the time. And later, when I had what seemed like a strange weakness in my right leg, Phil suggested I see Dog, who at the time was an orthopedist at a sports medicine clinic. A month later, Doc told me the problem seemed to be something else, and right away I panicked and thought he meant bone cancer. He assured me he just meant he wasn't smart enough to figure it out himself. So he sent me to see his old college drinking buddy, the best neurologist at San Francisco Medical Center. After what seemed like a year of tests, after I persuaded myself the fatigue was caused by smoking and the weakness in my leg was sciatica left over from my pregnancy, the drinking buddy told me I had multiple sclerosis. Yeah. Mary had cried hysterically. Mary had cried hysterically, then tried to console me, which made it all seem worse. For a while, she dropped by with casserole dishes from terrific recipes she just happened to find, until I told her to stop. And later, she made a big show of telling me how Doc's friend had assured her that my case was really quite mild, as if she were talking about the weather, that my life expectancy was not changed, that at age 70 I could be swinging a golf club and still hitting par. Although I would have to be careful not to stress myself either physically or emotionally. So really, everything's normal, she said a bit too cheerfully, except that Phil has to treat you nicer. And what could be wrong with that? I don't play golf, was all I told her. I'll teach you, she said cheerily. Of course, Mary was only trying to be kind. I admit that it was more my fault that our friendship became strained. I never told her directly how much her gestures of sympathy offended me, so of course she couldn't have known that I did not need someone to comfort me. I did not want to be coddled by casseroles. Kindness was compensation. Kindness was a reminder that my life had changed, was always changing, that people thought I should just accept all this and become strong or brave, more enlightened, more peaceful. I wanted nothing to do with that. Instead, I wanted to live my life with the same focus as most people, to worry about my children's education, but not whether I would be around to see them graduate, to rejoice that I had lost 5 pounds, and not be fearful that my muscle mass was eroding away. I wanted that what had become impossible. I wanted to forget. I was furious that Doc and his drinking buddy friend had discussed my medical condition with Mary. If they had told her that, then they must have also told her this, that with this disease, no prognosis could be made. I could be in remission for 10, 20, 30, or 40 years. Or the disease could suddenly take off tomorrow and roll downhill, faster and faster, and at the bottom, I would be left sitting in a wheelchair or worse. I know Mary was aware of this because I would often catch her looking at me from the corner of her eye whenever we passed someone who was disabled. One time she laughed nervously when she tried to park her car in a space that turned out to be a handicapped zone. Oops, she said, backing up fast. We certainly don't need that. In the beginning, Phil and I vowed to lead as normal a life together as possible. As normal as possible. It was like a meaningless chant. If I accidentally tripped over a toy left on the floor, I would spend 10 minutes apologizing to Tessa for yelling at her. Then another hour debating whether a normal person would have stumbled over some and then spend another hour debating whether a normal person would have stumbled over the same thing. Once, when we went to the beach for the express purpose of forgetting about all of this, I was filled with morbid thoughts instead. I watched the waves eating away at the shore, and I wondered aloud to feel whether I would one day be left as limp as seaweed or stiff like a crab. Meanwhile, Phil would read his old textbooks and every medical article he could find on the subject, and then he would become depressed that his own medical training offered no better understanding of a disease that could be described only as without known etiology, extremely variable, unpredictable, and without specific treatment. He attended medical conferences on neurological disorders. He once took me to an MS support group, but we turned right around as soon as we saw the wheelchairs. He would perform what he called weekly safety checks, testing my reflexes, monitoring the strength of my limbs. We even moved to a house with a swimming pool, so I could do daily muscle training. We did not mention to each other the fact that the house was one story and had few steps and wide hallways that could someday be made wheelchair accessible if necessary. We talked in code, as though we belonged to a secret cult, searching for a cure or a pattern of symptoms we could watch for, some kind of salvation from constant worry. And eventually we learned not to talk about the future, either the grim possibilities or the vague hopes. We did not dwell on the past, whether it had been a virus or genetics that had caused this to happen. We concerned ourselves with the here and now, small victories over the mundane irritations of life. Getting Tessa potty trained, correcting a mistake on our charge card bill, discovering why the car sputtered whenever we put it into third gear. Those became our constants, the things we could isolate and control in a life of unknown variables. So I can't really blame Phil for pretending that everything is normal. I wanted that more than he did. And now I can't tell him what I really feel, what it's like. All I know is that I wake up each morning in a panic, terrified that something might have changed while I slept. And there are days when I become obsessed if I lose something, a button, thinking my life won't be normal until I find it again. There are days when I think Phil is the most inconsiderate man in the world, simply because he forgot to buy one item on the grocery list. There are days when I organize my underwear drawer by color, as if this might make some kind of difference. Those are the bad days. On the good days, I remember that I'm lucky by a new standard. In the last 7 years, I have had only one major flare-up, which now means I lose my balance easily, especially when I'm upset or in a hurry. But I can still walk. I still take out the garbage. And sometimes I actually can forget for a few hours or almost the entire day. Of course, the worst part is when I remember once again, often in unexpected ways, that I'm living in a limbo land called remission. That delicate balance always threatens to go out of kilter when I see my mother, because that's when it hits me the hardest. I have this terrible disease and I never told her. I meant to tell her. There were several times when I planned to do exactly that. When I was first diagnosed, I said, Ma, you know that slight problem with my leg I told you about? Well, thank God, it turned out not to be cancer, but and right away, she told me about a customer of hers who had just died of cancer, how long he had suffered, how many wreaths the family had ordered. Long time ago, I saw that mole growing on his face. She said, I told him, go see a doctor. No problem, he said, age spot. Didn't do anything about it. By the time he died, his nose and cheek all eaten away. And then she warned me sternly, that's why you have to be careful. When Claire was born, without complications on my part or hers, I again started to tell my mother. But she interrupted me, this time to lament how my father was not there to see his grandchildren. And then she went into her usual endless monologue about my father getting a fate he didn't deserve. My father had died of stomach cancer when I was 14, and for years my mother would search in her mind for the causes, as if she could still undo the disaster by finding the reason why it had occurred in the first place. He was such a good man, my mother would lament. So why did he die? And sometimes she cited God's will as the reason, only she gave it a different twist. She said it must have been because my father was a minister. He listened to everyone else's troubles. She said he swallowed them until he made himself sick. Ah, 应该 find him another job. 应该 was my mother always said when she meant I should have. 应该 meant she should have altered the direction of fate. She should have prevented disaster. To me, 应该 meant my mother lived a life of regrets that never faded with time. If anything, the regrets grew as she searched for more reasons underlying my father's death. One time she cited her own version of environmental causes, that the electrician had been sick at the time he rewired our kitchen. He built that sickness right into our house, she declared. It's true, I just found out the electrician died of cancer too. 应该 pick somebody else. And there was also this superstition, what I came to think of as her theory of the 9 bad fates. She said she had once heard that a person is destined to die if 8 bad things happen. If you don't recognize the 8 ahead of time and prevent them, the 9th one is always fatal. And then she would ruminate over what the 8 bad things might have been, how she should have been sharp enough to detect them in time. To this day, it drives me crazy listening to her various hypotheses, the way religion, medicine, and superstition all merge with her own beliefs. She puts no faith in other people's logic. To her, logic is a sneaky excuse for tragedies, mistakes, and accidents. And according to my mother, nothing is an accident. She's like a Chinese version of Freud, or worse. Everything has a reason. Everything could have been prevented. The last time I was at her house, for example, I knocked over a framed picture of my father and broke the glass. My mother picked up the shards and moaned. Why did this happen? I thought it was a rhetorical question at first, but then she said to me, do you know? It was an accident, I said. My elbow bumped into it, and of course, her question has sent my mind racing, wondering if my clumsiness was a symptom of deterioration. Why this picture? She muttered to herself. So I never told my mother. At first, I didn't want to hear her theories on my illness, what caused this to happen, how she should have done this or that to prevent it. I did not want her to remind me. And now that so much time has gone by, the fact that I still haven't told her makes the illness seem 10 times worse. I'm always reminded whenever I see her, whenever I hear her voice. Mary knows that, and that's why I still get mad at her. Not because she strips over herself to avoid talking about my medical condition. I'm mad because she told her mother, my Auntie Helen. I had to tell her. She explained to me in an offhand offhand sort of way. She was always saying to me, "Tell Perro to visit her mother more often, only an hour drive. Tell Perro she should ask her mother to move in with her. Less lonely for her mother that way." Finally, I told my mother I couldn't tell you those things, and she asked why not. Mary shrugged. "You know her mother. I couldn't lie to her. Of course, I made her swear not to tell your mother, that you were going to tell her yourself." "I can drive," I told Mary, "and that's not the reason why I haven't asked my mother to live with me." And then I glared at her. "How could you do this?" "She won't say anything," Mary said. "I made her promise." And then she added a bit defiantly, "Besides, you should have told your mother a long time ago." Mary and I didn't exactly have a fight, but things definitely chilled between us after that. She already knew that was about the worst possible thing she could have done to me, because she had done it once before, 9 years ago, when I confided to her that I was pregnant. My first pregnancy had ended in a miscarriage early on, and my mother had gone on and on about how much coffee I drank, how it was my jogging that did it, how Phil should make sure I ate more. So when I became pregnant again, I decided to wait, to tell my mother when I was in my fourth month or so. But in the third month, I made the mistake of confiding in Mary. And Mary slipped this news to her mother, and Auntie Helen didn't exactly tell my mother, but when my mother proudly announced my pregnancy to the cons, Auntie Helen immediately showed my mother the little yellow sweater she had already hand knit for the baby. I didn't stop hearing the laments from my mother, even after Tessa was born. "Why could you tell the Quans, not your own mother?" she'd complain. When she stood over it and became really angry, she accused me of making her look like a fool. Huh, Auntie Helen was pretending to be so surprised, so innocent. "Oh, I didn't knit the sweater for Paris baby," she said. "I made it just in case." So far, Auntie Helen had kept the news about my medical condition to herself, but this didn't stop her from treating me like an invalid. But when I used to go to her house, she would tell me to sit down right away, while she went to find me a pillow for my back. She would rub her palm up and down my arm, asking me how I was, telling me how she had always thought of me as a daughter, and then she would sigh and confess some bit of bad news, as if to balance out what she already knew about me. "Your poor Uncle Henry, he almost got laid off last month," she would say. "So many budget cuts now. Who knows what's going to happen? Don't tell your mother. I don't want her to worry over us." And then I would worry that Auntie Helen would think her little confessions were payment in kind, that she would take them as license to accidentally slip and tell my mother, "Oh, Winnie, I thought you knew about your daughter's tragedy." And so I dreaded the day my mother would call and ask me 100 different ways, "Why did Auntie Helen know? Why did you never tell me? Why didn't you let me prevent this from happening to you?" And then what answer could I give? This is such intriguing and captivating stories, man. I just love this. At the dinner, we've been seated at the kids' table. Only know the kids are in their 30s and 40s. The real kids, Tessa and Cleo, are seated with my mother. Phil is the only non-Chinese tonight, although that wasn't the case at past family events. Baobao's two former wives were what Auntie Helen called Americans, as if she were referring to a racial group. She must be thrilled that Baobao's bride-to-be is a girl named Mimi Wang, who is not only Chinese but from a well-to-do family that owns 3 travel agencies. "She looks Japanese," my mother had said when we first arrived and had been introduced to Mimi. I don't know why she said that. To me, Mimi looks just plain weird, as well as awfully young. I guess that she is around 20, although it may be her dyed orange hair and pierced nose that makes her seem so young. I heard that she was training to be a hairstylist at a trendy salon called Oliphants. My mother heard that what Mimi did mostly was wash people's hair and sweep up loose clippings. Bao had changed his look since the last time I saw him. His hair is slicked back with pomade. He has on a black t-shirt underneath an iridescent shark skin suit. Each time he introduces Mimi to the guest, I allow myself to stare at her pierced nose. I wonder what happens when she has a cold. How's my favorite cuz? Baba says to me from across the table, then gives me a toast with his upraised champagne glass. Looking good. I like the hair, short, nice. Mimi, what do you think of Paris' haircut? Nice, huh? He has a knack for handing out compliments like party favors, one for everybody. I wonder sometimes if I would have liked him better if I didn't already know so much about him. Hey Phil, bro, Baba calls, pouring more champagne. You put on a few pounds, I see. The good life's been good. Maybe you're ready for that new system I told you about. Lot of decibels for the dollar. Baba sells steroids and TVs at the good guys. He's very good at convincing people that their and eyes are refined enough to tell the difference between a standard model and its $500 upgrade. Phil once said that if Baba was turned loose, he could sell Bibles to the shiites. Okay, I'll stop reading here. On page 34, I'll continue another time. That was enjoyable. Oh, 20 minutes. Wow. Thanks for reading with me.